The rain started before dusk, a slow patter against the window panes that grew heavier as the evening stretched on. By the time the streetlights flickered on, it was pouring steadily, a dark curtain of water blurring the view of the houses across the road. The storm had been predicted, sure, but not with the weight it carried that night. The kind of rain that pooled fast, flooding ditches, slicking asphalt into mirrors. The kind of rain where you felt closed in, like the outside world had been drowned and the only thing left was your little square of light indoors. I had always liked the rain, but something about that night made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way the power had flickered twice already, the bulbs dimming just long enough to make me aware of how silent the house would feel if they went out completely. Maybe it was the phone call I'd gotten an hour earlier from a number I didn't recognize. A voice crackling through the static, saying nothing at first, just breathing, and then faintly, almost drowned out by noise, whispering my name. I hung up fast, my pulse jumping, telling myself it was just some prank. Wrong number. Coincidence. But the voice, it wasn't like a random stranger. It sounded strained, almost familiar, though I couldn't place it. By 9 o'clock, the rain had become a constant roar, hammering on the roof, slapping against the windows. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling my phone, trying to ignore how the storm made the walls seem thinner, the house more fragile. I lived alone, in a small rental house on the edge of town, the kind of place where the backyard ended in a thick line of trees and there were no neighbors close enough to see from the windows. In a storm like this, it felt isolated, too isolated. When I heard the first knock, I froze. It wasn't loud, just a soft rapping at the front door, barely audible over the storm. For a second, I thought I imagined it. No one would be out in weather like this. But then it came again, 3 slow knocks, deliberate. I set my phone down and stood, my heart pounding. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness and rain streaming across the glass. The porch light had gone out, probably the storm, and the yard beyond was just shadows and water. I waited, holding my breath. Whoever it was didn't knock again. I should have left it. I should have walked back to the couch and ignored it. But some mix of curiosity and nerves pushed me to crack the door just slightly. The chain still on. The rain lashed in, cold and sharp. I squinted out into the night, but the porch was empty. No one there. Just the sound of water rushing from the gutters and the dark silhouette of trees swaying at the edge of the yard. Closing the door, I locked it tight, every bolt, every latch. My skin prickled. I tried to laugh it off, storm playing tricks, maybe a branch tapping, maybe I'd imagined the rhythm of the knocks. But when I returned to the couch, my phone screen lit up. A notification, one new voicemail. I hadn't even heard it ring. Opening the voicemail, I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. At first, just static like wind rushing through the mic. Then, clear as day, that same slow knocking sound, 3 knocks, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, a voice whispering my name. I dropped the phone onto the couch, my chest tight. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the rain anymore. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe whoever had called earlier was messing with me. Maybe they'd pulled my number, decided to scare me. But how would they know my name? How would they know to knock? Another knock came, this time at the back door. I jumped to my feet. That door led out to the small deck, which faced the line of woods. No one should have been out there. There wasn't even a walkway, just mud and tangled brush. The knock was firmer this time, though still spaced, deliberate. 3 raps, each one echoing through the kitchen. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a heavy flashlight from the counter, and walked slowly toward the sound, every step feeling like it took an hour. My reflection looked pale in the dark window above the sink, the outside beyond it, nothing but shifting shadows of rain. The knock came again. I almost swung the flashlight through the glass just to make it stop, but I forced myself to look instead. Pressing my face close, cupping my hands to block the glare, I scanned the deck. Nothing. Empty. No figure, no movement but the downpour rippling across the boards. Backing away, I locked that door too, double-checked it. My breathing was too fast now, every muscle tight. Then the power went out. The house plunged into blackness. The only sound, the roar of rain and the ticking of cooling appliances. For a long moment, I stood in the middle of the kitchen, frozen, gripping the flashlight so tight my hand hurt. When I finally clicked it on, the beam cut through the dark, landing on the floor, the counters, the doorway. The light felt small, swallowed by the house. I didn't know what to do. My phone had 1 bar of service left, the storm probably killing reception. Should I call the police? What would I even say? That someone knocked on my doors during a storm? They wouldn't take it seriously. They might not even make it out here on roads like this. So I stood there, listening. And then, faintly, under the storm, I heard something else. A voice. It was coming from outside, near the back deck. I couldn't make out the words through the rain, but it was a low murmur, too steady to be wind. I held my breath, straining to hear, and for a split second, the sound cleared. It was my name. Drawn out, almost sing-song, repeated twice. My stomach dropped. I staggered back, flashlight beam jerking across the room, across the dark windows. I didn't want to look, but my eyes kept darting toward the glass, expecting a face to be there, pressed against it. Then came the footsteps. Not loud, but distinct. Wet shoes on wood. Slow, heavy steps across the deck, closer to the door. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as the steps reached the threshold and stopped. Silence. Then 3 knocks, right there on the other side of the door. I bolted. I ran from the kitchen into the living room, nearly tripping in the dark. I grabbed my phone, my keys. I didn't even care about shoes, about a coat. I had to get out, storm or not. My gut screamed that staying meant something worse than drowning in the rain. Unlocking the front door, I yanked it open, the storm slamming against me. The rain was freezing, soaking me instantly, but I didn't care. I sprinted down the steps toward my car, parked at the edge of the driveway. Halfway there, the beam of my flashlight cut across the yard and froze. There was someone standing at the tree line, tall, unmoving, a silhouette against the sheets of rain. I couldn't make out a face, just the shape, standing still, watching. I stumbled, heart in my throat, then lunged for my car. Fumbling with the keys, slipping on the wet handle, I finally yanked the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut. The figure hadn't moved. Still there. Just watching. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition, twisting, praying it would turn over. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Headlights burst through the rain, and the figure was gone. Gone. I sat there, shaking, staring at the empty trees. I don't remember how long I sat before I finally put the car in gear and tore down the flooded road, wipers slashing, tires skidding on water. I just knew I couldn't go back. Not that night. Not ever. And still, even now, when it rains hard enough, when the sound drowns everything else out, I swear I hear it again. 3 slow knocks. And my name. Story the end. The rain was relentless that night, drumming against the windshield of my old Ford like a million tiny hammers. I had taken the long route home, driving through the outskirts of a small town in Pennsylvania, a place I barely knew, just to avoid the highway. The storm had turned the country roads into slick rivers, reflecting the yellow-orange glow of the street lamps that flickered as if struggling to stay alive. I could barely see a few feet in front of me, and the wipers on the car squealed with every swipe, a sound that somehow added to the unease creeping up my spine. It had started as a normal Friday night. I'd stayed late at the office in Philadelphia, catching up on work that I'd neglected all week. By the time I got in my car, it was past midnight, the city streets eerily empty, except for the occasional taxi cutting through the fog and rain. I needed a break from the monotony of the office and the constant hum of fluorescent lights, so I decided to take a detour. I'd heard that the old back roads around Bucks County were beautiful in the rain, winding through dense forests and over small creeks, but the darkness that night made the beauty hard to appreciate. As I drove deeper into the country, the road narrowed, and the trees on either side seemed to lean in, forming a tunnel. The rain was coming down harder now, hammering the roof of the car with such intensity that it was impossible to hear anything else. I squinted through the windshield, trying to spot any movement, any other cars, but the road was empty. That's when I first saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the road. At first, I thought it was someone hitchhiking, but something about the way it stood, motionless, shoulders hunched, head down, made me uneasy. My instinct was to keep driving, but then the figure lifted its head and I saw it. A pale face, slick with rain, eyes wide and unblinking, staring directly at me. My stomach dropped. I hit the brakes, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt, and the figure didn't move. It just stayed there, staring. I should have kept going, should have ignored it entirely, but curiosity, that dangerous human flaw, made me stop a few feet short. "Hey, are you okay?" I shouted over the roar of the rain, rolling down the passenger window just a crack so I could speak. The figure tilted its head, and that's when I realized it wasn't moving like a person. It wasn't shifting weight, wasn't breathing, wasn't even blinking. And then, slowly, impossibly, it raised a hand. It was pointing down the road in the direction I had been driving. I shook my head, fumbling with the door lock. "No, I'm not going that way," I said, my voice shaky. The figure stayed, pointing insistently. A shiver ran through me. Something about that gesture felt urgent, desperate. Against every logical thought, I felt compelled to follow it. I eased the car forward, the tires squealing slightly on the wet pavement. The figure turned and began walking along the side of the road, still pointing. I followed for a few miles in tense silence, rain drenching me through the cracked window, headlights cutting through the downpour. The road curved, and I realized I didn't know where I was. My GPS had lost signal a while back, and the small map on my phone was useless in the storm. Then I saw the house. It was set back from the road, almost swallowed by the woods, its windows dark, the shape of it obscured by branches and shadows. There was something wrong about it. Even from the distance, I could tell. It wasn't just abandoned. It was alive in some wrong way, like the structure itself had a pulse. The figure stopped at the edge of the driveway. It lowered its hand, and I thought I saw it smile, though it could have been the trick of the rain on the streetlight. I didn't want to, but I felt compelled to stop at the house. I pulled the car up to the porch, rainwater dripping from the eaves, and the figure disappeared into the shadows of the forest behind it. The front door was slightly ajar. I froze, my hand on the wet, cold door handle. Every rational thought screamed at me to leave, to get back in the car, but something invisible pushed me forward. I stepped inside, the smell of wet wood and something else, something decaying, hitting me immediately. The air was thick, heavy, like it had weight. The house was dark except for the occasional flash of lightning outside, illuminating the interior for a split second. I could make out furniture covered in dusty sheets, cobwebs hanging in the corners like long, white fingers. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded small and ridiculous in the enormous silent house. Then I heard it, a faint scratching, coming from upstairs. I froze. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like nails against the floorboards. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray cat, but the sound had a rhythm to it, deliberate, almost impatient. I moved toward the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The scratching stopped as I reached the top, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the rain hammering the roof. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors, all warped with age and moisture. One door at the end of the hall was slightly open, darkness spilling out into the corridor. I approached it, every nerve in my body screaming to turn back, and pushed it gently. Inside was a room, stripped of furniture except for an old mirror against the far wall. Its surface was streaked with grime, and in the dim flashes of lightning I thought I saw movement behind it. My reflection stared back, pale and wet, but behind me in the mirror there was something else. A shadow, taller than me, hunched, face obscured. I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was closer, its outline sharp now, clearly humanoid but distorted. I stumbled back, tripping over the warped floorboards, the wall, and when I hit the wall, I turned to run, but the door slammed shut on its own. Panic set in. I pounded on the door, yanking at the handle. Nothing. The mirror seemed to breathe, its reflection twisting, showing the shadow moving closer to me. I backed into a corner, my mind screaming, my chest tight with fear. And then I heard a whisper, soft, urgent, almost coaxing. "Come to me." I couldn't move. The shadow in the mirror reached out, and I felt a cold wind brush past me, like icy fingers tracing my spine. I screamed, a sound swallowed immediately by the storm outside. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor, and when I bent to pick it up, I caught movement in the hallway outside the room. Hundreds of shadows, flickering, impossible, converging. The rain outside intensified, thunder shaking the house like it was about to collapse. The whispers grew louder, layered, overlapping, pleading. Come to me. Come. Join us. I backed into the wall, trying to control my panic, my mind searching for a way out. The room felt alive now, walls pulsing with a heartbeat I could feel through the soles of my shoes. I noticed a small window high on the wall. I ran toward it, sliding the cracked glass open and heaving myself through. I landed in the muddy yard, rain soaking me immediately, and didn't stop running. Behind me, the house seemed to stretch impossibly, windows multiplying, doors forming where none had existed before. I could hear the whispers in the wind, calling me back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, skidding across the wet driveway. The door handle was slick with rain and mud, but I tore it open and slammed inside. My hands trembled as I started the engine, tires spinning on the wet ground, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, the house was gone. There was only the forest, dark and endless, the road disappearing into the rain. I drove for what felt like hours, rain blurring everything until I reached a small gas station. The lights were warm and comforting, the hum of fluorescent bulbs grounding me in reality. I ran inside, shaking, and the clerk looked up from his counter. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, concern in his voice. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. There's something out there," I managed to croak. "A house. People. Shadows." He frowned. "It's just a storm, man. Just a storm. You probably got lost." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him what I had seen, but the words caught in my throat. I felt absurd, like a child telling stories of monsters in the dark. I paid for gas and left, driving home in silence, the rain finally letting up by the time I reached the outskirts of the city. I tried to forget. I told myself it had been exhaustion, imagination, stress from work. But the memory of that shadow in the mirror, of the whispers, and the pale figure pointing down the road stayed with me. Weeks later, I found myself driving back toward Bucks County on a sunny afternoon, rational curiosity getting the better of me. I followed the same road, the same curves, looking for the house. It wasn't there. There was only forest, dense and silent, the road empty. I checked the map, double-checked my GPS, and even asked a gas station clerk in a nearby town, but no one had ever heard of the house. No record existed, no rumors, nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain returned, heavy and relentless, tapping against my window. And when I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, I dreamt of the house again. The figure appeared at the edge of the road, pointing. The mirror waited inside, dark and pulsing, and I woke with the sound of whispers in my ears, soft and insistent. "Come to me. Come to us." I haven't driven that road again. I haven't ventured into the countryside after dark. But sometimes late at night when the rain falls heavy against my windows, I swear I see shadows moving just beyond the tree line, and I feel the pull, the same compulsion to follow, to see what's waiting, and I know that if I ever give in, I won't come back. Story the end. The rain came down in sheets that night, drumming against the roof of my car so hard I could barely hear myself think. I had left work late, later than usual, my body tired and my mind numb from the endless paperwork and phone calls. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving me alone with the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant roar of traffic outside. I was the last one to leave, which wasn't unusual. The highway was slick, the yellow lines blurring beneath the reflections of streetlights. The rain made everything feel unreal, like I was driving through a world painted in silver streaks. I hadn't expected much on my drive home, just the usual long stretch of highway, the occasional car passing by, and the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers. But the deeper I drove into the country, the more isolated it became. The city lights faded, replaced by darkened trees and the occasional rundown farmhouse. My phone's battery was low, but I still kept checking it, half expecting a text from my girlfriend. I hadn't told her I'd be late. She would have been worried. I could feel her worry pressing at the back of my mind, but there was nothing to do but keep driving. Around the 2-hour mark, the rain intensified. It wasn't just a drizzle anymore, it was relentless, hammering the hood of my car like it wanted to push me off the road. I slowed down, turning on my high beams to cut through the murk. That's when I saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road, soaked through, shivering. Or at least it looked like it was shivering. At first, I thought maybe it was a hitchhiker, someone stranded in the storm. But the way it stood there, perfectly still, with its head tilted slightly, made me uneasy. I slowed to a stop a few feet away. The wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear, and the figure's face remained hidden under the hood of a drenched jacket. I rolled down the passenger window slightly. "Hey, you need help?" I shouted over the rain. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. My gut twisted. I didn't know why, but I felt the kind of fear you feel when the air suddenly goes cold for no reason. I wanted to drive away, but something rooted me in place. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the absurd hope that someone truly needed me. "Do you need a ride?" I tried again, my voice trembling slightly. Then finally, it moved, or at least I thought it did. The figure stepped closer into the glow of my headlights, and I could finally see its face. It was wrong. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, but there was something grotesque about him. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes, oh God, his eyes were black like pits in his skull. His mouth hung open, slightly twisted, and I could see teeth that weren't quite human, jagged and yellowed. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there staring. I slammed the car into drive, my hands shaking on the wheel, and floored it. My headlights caught a glimpse of him on the side of the road for just a moment before he was gone, swallowed by the rain. My heart pounded, and I forced myself to calm down, telling myself it was a trick of the storm, that the stress and exhaustion were making me see things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. The road stretched out endlessly, lined with trees that bent and swayed in the wind. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw movement between the trunks, a shadow that shouldn't have been there. My wipers were barely keeping up, streaking the windshield with water as the storm screamed around me. I kept my eyes on the road, but the feeling of being watched clung to my neck and shoulders like wet fabric. I took the next exit, desperate to get off the highway. The exit led to a narrow, two-lane road that wound through farmland and forest. There were no streetlights, just the blinding reflection of my headlights in the rain. My phone buzzed, just one bar of signal, and I saw a text from my girlfriend. "Where are you? You're late." I typed back quickly, "Caught in the rain. We'll be home soon." As I pressed send, I noticed a car behind me. Its headlights were dim but steady, matching my speed exactly. I slowed down, hoping it would pass, but it stayed behind me. Then it started to flash its lights, the high beams flickering in my rearview mirror. My stomach sank. I had passed no houses for miles. There was no reason anyone should be there. Panic rose. I turned onto another side road, hoping to lose it, but the car followed. Every twist of the road, every curve, it stayed behind me. I considered stopping, but something inside told me that would be worse. I needed to keep moving. The rain seemed to get worse the further I drove. My tires splashed through puddles that felt like small lakes. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the side of the road again. Another figure, or maybe the same one from before, emerged from the darkness. This time I could see more clearly. It was wearing a long coat, soaked through, dragging behind it like a shadow. Its head was tilted in the same unnatural way. I slammed on the brakes, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. The figure didn't flinch, didn't move. I could see its eyes now, black and endless, staring straight through me. I panicked, throwing the car into reverse and turning around as fast as I dared. The figure stayed where it was, standing as if it had always been there, waiting. The car behind me was gone. I don't know how, but it disappeared. Maybe it had been a hallucination, just like I tried to tell myself about the figure. But the fear in my chest didn't go away. I kept driving, choosing roads at random, trying to put distance between myself and whatever it was. Hours seemed to pass. The rain never let up. My headlights cut through a tunnel of dark trees, reflecting off the wet leaves. Every shadow looked alive. Every noise, branches snapping, tires squelching through mud, made me jump. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but none came. Then I saw it again. At first, I thought it was a deer, or maybe a person in the distance, but it was neither. It stood in the middle of the road, its form vaguely human but distorted, as if the rain and darkness had warped it. My instincts screamed at me to stop, but I knew stopping meant death. I swerved around it, heart hammering, and the car fishtailed, sliding dangerously close to the edge of the road. I didn't look back. I drove faster, every turn of the wheel a desperate attempt to escape the night. Then the rain stopped abruptly. One moment I was fighting the storm, and the next, the road was calm, slick, but quiet. The silence was worse than the rain. My headlights reflected on the wet pavement, but there was no movement, no shadow. I kept driving, unsure how long I had been on the road. My arms ached from gripping the wheel so tightly. My eyes burned from staring. That's when I saw the house. It looked abandoned, a small farmhouse with peeling paint and darkened windows. There was a single light in the upstairs window. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it, like it was calling me. I pulled into the driveway, mud splashing against the tires. The door was slightly ajar, swaying in the breeze. I hesitated, but something inside me, fear, curiosity, exhaustion, pushed me forward. I stepped inside. The air smelled of mold and rot, thick and heavy. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. Upstairs, the light flickered. I climbed slowly, my heart thudding in my chest. The hallway was narrow, lined with peeling wallpaper and darkened photos. At the end of the hall was a door, slightly open, light spilling out. I pushed it gently. The room was empty. At least it seemed empty at first. Then I saw it. The figure, sitting on the edge of the bed, its head tilted the same way as before, staring at me. My stomach dropped. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It opened its mouth, and I heard a whisper, barely audible over my own racing heart. "You can't leave." I screamed and bolted, stumbling down the stairs and out into the rain-soaked night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, keys trembling in my hands. I drove without thought, without direction, just moving, moving, moving. The rain returned, light at first, then heavy again, as if it was chasing me. I never found the highway. I ended up circling back into the same dark roads, passing the same trees, the same abandoned fields. Every now and then, I thought I saw the figure at the side of the road, standing there, waiting. I never stopped to confirm. I just drove, night after night, rain after rain. I never returned home. I never told anyone what happened. And sometimes when the rain hits just right and the wipers slap against the windshield, I swear I can see those black eyes staring through the darkness, reminding me that I'm still being followed. The storm never ends. Story the end. The rain was relentless that night, hammering the asphalt in sheets so thick that the streetlights barely penetrated the gloom. I had been driving for hours along the back roads of upstate New York, roads I barely remembered from previous trips, and the storm made everything unfamiliar. The windshield wipers were on full blast, squealing with every pass, yet the rain seemed to strike faster than they could sweep it away. I had left the highway hours ago, trying to avoid the long line of traffic that always built up when the weather turned bad. I told myself it was just a scenic detour, a chance to breathe and escape the monotony of my life. But as the darkness deepened and the rain continued without pause, I felt the first true stirrings of fear. The road narrowed, flanked by dense woods on both sides. Branches, heavy with water, drooped toward the asphalt like they were reaching for the car. The headlights cut through the rain in short, uneven beams, illuminating patches of road, only to swallow them back in darkness. Somewhere up ahead, I thought I saw movement, something standing at the edge of the road. My stomach sank. At first, I assumed it was a hitchhiker, soaked and shivering, waving me down. But there was something off. The figure was unnaturally still, almost statuesque. Its posture was wrong, rigid, and the rain seemed to cling to it like a second skin. I slowed, my foot hovering over the brake, trying to make out a face. Then it moved, or at least I thought it did. It raised its arm slowly, pointing down the road in the direction I had been driving. My pulse quickened. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to follow that silent gesture. My rational mind screamed to ignore it, to drive past as if it weren't there, but the urge to obey was stronger than reason. I pressed on, my tires hissing over the wet pavement. The figure stayed at the edge of the road, following alongside me without moving its legs, impossibly keeping pace. The world around me felt unreal, the storm louder, the woods closer, the darkness thicker. And then I saw it, a house. It was set far back from the road, almost swallowed by the surrounding trees. Its silhouette was grotesque, gnarled like it had grown out of the earth rather than being built. The roof sagged in unnatural angles, and the windows were dark, though I could swear I saw flickers of movement inside. There was a feeling about it, a presence that pressed against the air, heavy and suffocating. The figure stopped at the edge of the driveway and disappeared into the trees behind it. My instincts screamed to leave, but I found myself pulling the car into the mud-slick driveway. The tires slipped slightly on the wet earth, but I didn't care. The door to the house was slightly ajar, darkness spilling out like a warning. I stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately, a mix of mildew, rot, and something else I couldn't name. The air was thick, heavy, almost viscous, like it had weight. The storm outside was louder now, echoing through the empty rooms. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, illuminating furniture covered in dusty sheets, cobwebs hanging in corners like skeletal fingers. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded small, insignificant, swallowed immediately by the oppressive silence. Then came a sound, a faint scratching from upstairs. Nails against wood, deliberate, slow. My heart skipped. I told myself it was an animal, perhaps a raccoon or a squirrel, but the rhythm of it was deliberate, almost impatient. I moved toward the stairs, each creak of the floorboards under my weight echoing through the house. The scratching stopped as I reached the top, leaving only the rain and the soft hum of distant thunder. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. One at the end of the hall was slightly open, darkness spilling out into the corridor. I approached it cautiously. Inside was a single room, almost empty except for a tall old mirror propped against the far wall. Its surface was streaked with grime and water stains, and in the flashes of lightning I thought I saw movement behind it. My reflection stared back pale and wet, but behind me, in the mirror, there was a shadow, a figure, taller than me, hunched, its face obscured. I spun around. The room was empty. But when I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was closer. It had no distinct features, just darkness shaped like a person. I stumbled backward, tripping over a warped floorboard. As I struggled to get up, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me. I pounded on the door, screamed, yanked at the handle. Nothing. The mirror seemed to breathe, pulsating in the flickering light. And then I heard it, a whisper so soft I thought I imagined it. "Come to me," it said. I backed into the corner, trembling, chest tight. The shadow in the mirror stretched, reaching toward me. I felt a chill, like icy fingers tracing my spine. I wanted to scream, but couldn't, my voice trapped. And then the whispers multiplied, layering over each other, coming from every corner of the room. "Come. Join us. Come to me." I noticed a small window high on the wall. I didn't think. I just climbed, shoved it open, and jumped into the mud-soaked yard. I ran, branches clawing at my clothes, rain soaking me instantly. Behind me, the house seemed to change, twisting, stretching, impossible geometry, as if the forest itself had swallowed it and reshaped it while I wasn't looking. The whispers followed, growing louder, insistent. I made it to my car, slipping and sliding on the wet driveway, heart hammering, lungs burning. I threw myself in, started the engine, tires spinning until they gripped the earth enough to move. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the house was gone. Nothing remained but trees, dark and endless. I drove for hours, not stopping until I reached the edge of town, streets lit and familiar. I tried to rationalize, telling myself exhaustion, hallucination, imagination, but the memory of the shadow, the whispering, the figure pointing down the road stayed with me. Weeks later, the storm returned, and so did the compulsion. In the late hours of a rainy Tuesday, I found myself behind the wheel again, on the same desolate roads, searching. The trees loomed, the asphalt slick, the world a gray blur of rain and shadows. And again I saw the figure, standing by the roadside, arm raised, pointing. This time I didn't stop. But in my peripheral vision, movement. Shadows detached from the woods, fluid and impossible, following. The rain intensified, washing the world in water and dark light. I drove faster, heart pounding, until the trees thinned and the road became familiar. The town's gas stations, stores, and streetlights emerged like islands in the storm. I slowed, hands shaking. I never found the house again. No trace existed. I asked locals, checked maps, scoured online forums for urban legends, but nothing. It was as if the place never existed. But the figure, the shadows, the whispers, they never truly left. Some nights, when the rain falls heavy, when I can't sleep, I hear it again. The whispering calling me to the forest, to the road, to the house that may never be there. And sometimes in the corner of my vision, I see shapes moving just beyond the trees outside my window, dark and waiting. I tell myself it's paranoia, stress, imagination. But deep down, I know it's not. I know that if I ever follow that road again, if I ever stop to obey the silent gestures, I will not return. The thought terrifies me, yet there is a pull constant and insistent, and I know the next storm, the next long night, may be the one I can't resist. The memory of the shadow in the mirror, hunched and reaching, never leaves me. It lingers at the edges of my vision, in reflections, in dark corners. I dream of it. Sometimes I wake to the sound of whispering rain on my windows, soft and compelling. Come to me, join us. I no longer drive those roads at night. I no longer take detours in the countryside. I've moved, changed jobs, changed routines, but the feeling follows like a phantom rain cloud always just behind me, waiting for a moment of weakness. The house, the shadows, the whispers, they are patient. And so am I, barely counting the hours and hoping I never see them again. Story, the end. The rain was already coming down in sheets when I left work that night. I should have gone straight home, but something about the storm kept me lingering in the parking lot. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of wet asphalt and oil rising from the ground, and the kind of tension that makes you feel like the whole sky might come crashing down. I stood there under the flickering yellow glow of the street lamp, staring out at the empty lot and listening to the steady hiss of water hitting the ground. My car was the last one left, sitting alone near the far end. Everyone else had gone home hours earlier. By the time I slid into the driver's seat, water was dripping down the back of my collar. The storm had only gotten worse, the wind pushing the rain sideways against the windshield, thunder rolling so loud that it rattled the frame of the car. I turned the key, the engine sputtered to life, and the radio burst with static. My wipers screeched back and forth, smearing more than they cleared, but I told myself I'd be fine. The route home was only 30 minutes if the roads weren't too flooded. I should have stayed on the main highway. Instead, halfway there, I got this stupid idea to take the back roads, the ones that wound through farmland and patches of forest. I told myself it would be quieter, safer. No chance of a drunk driver careening into me if I stayed away from the highway. But the further I drove into the darkness of those rural roads, the more I felt like I'd made a mistake. The trees pressed in from both sides, their heavy branches whipping and thrashing in the wind, dropping limbs onto the road. The rain made everything slick, the white lines blurred almost to nothing. I slowed to a crawl, leaning forward over the wheel, straining to see. That's when my headlights caught something ahead. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer maybe standing in the middle of the road. But when I squinted, I saw it was a person. A man, soaked through, clothes plastered to his body, standing perfectly still in the center of the road. He wasn't waving for help. He wasn't trying to flag me down. He was just standing there, head tilted downward, his arms hanging limp at his sides. I slammed the brakes, the tires sliding on the waterlogged asphalt. I stopped only a few feet away from him, heart hammering. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, water dripping off him like he'd been standing in the storm for hours. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. His face was pale in the headlights, his eyes wide and glassy, staring directly at me. I swear, even from inside the car, I could see his lips moving, though the storm drowned out whatever he was saying. I rolled the window down a crack, just enough to hear, and the sound that came through chilled me straight to my bones. Don't go back. His voice was raw, almost a whisper, but I heard it clearly. He repeated it, louder this time. Don't go back. I froze, fingers gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The rain hammered the roof, my wipers squealed, the thunder cracked, and this man stood there repeating those words, staring at me like he knew me, like he was trying to warn me about something I didn't understand. I wanted to ask what he meant. I wanted to roll down the window further, to get a better look at him, but some primal instinct screamed at me not to. I shifted into reverse, tires spitting water, and the man didn't move. I backed up until I had enough space to swerve around him. As I passed, I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to look directly at him. But in my peripheral vision, I swear I saw him smile. The storm only got worse as I pressed on. The road twisted through the woods, and the trees closed in tighter, their wet leaves brushing against the sides of my car. I turned the radio on, desperate for some distraction, but all I got was static. Every so often, through the hiss, I thought I heard a voice whispering. The road dipped into a low stretch that had turned into a shallow river. I slowed to ease through, water lapping at the tires. That's when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Another car. Relief surged through me. At least I wasn't alone out here anymore. But then I realized the lights were wrong. They were too close together, too dim, and they didn't bounce on the road like real headlights. They just floated, steady, following me. I pressed the gas harder, but the lights stayed behind me, never gaining, never falling back. My chest tightened with dread. I flicked on my high beams, checked the mirrors again, and the lights were gone. The road was empty, only the storm behind me. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel. I kept driving, mile after mile, until I saw a small gas station glowing faintly in the distance. The neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters burned out, but the sight of it felt like salvation. I pulled in, parked under the awning, and ran inside. The place was empty except for an old clerk behind the counter. He looked up, surprised to see anyone out in the storm. "Hell of a night," he said. I nodded, trying to catch my breath. There was someone in the road, out there in the woods. "Do people live out this way?" The clerk frowned. "Not for miles, not since the flood. Whole stretch of road out that way was cut off. Ain't safe no more." Why hesitated? Telling him what I'd seen felt insane, but I couldn't stop myself. "I saw a man standing in the middle of the road. He told me not to go back." The clerk's expression darkened. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You sure you weren't seeing things? You been driving long?" "I know what I saw," I said. He shook his head. "Folks around here tell stories about that stretch of road, about people seeing things in the rain, things that ain't supposed to be there. Best you stay away from it." I left soon after, the storm still pounding outside. The drive back to town felt longer than it should have. I kept waiting to see the man again, or those floating lights, but the road stayed empty. Still, the whole way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the trees. That night, I dreamed of him. The man standing in the rain, lips moving, eyes wide. Only this time he wasn't warning me. He was inside my house, standing at the foot of my bed, dripping water onto the carpet, whispering the same words, "Don't go back." I woke up drenched in sweat, the sound of rain still pounding against the windows. I told myself it was just the storm, just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But the smell of wet earth lingered in my room, and the carpet at the foot of my bed was damp to the touch. The storm lasted 3 more days. Each night, I dreamed of him. Each night, he got closer. And every morning, there were wet footprints trailing from my bedroom door to the edge of the bed. Story. The end. The rain started early that evening, thick and relentless, hammering against the asphalt like it wanted to tear the world apart. I had been driving home from a late shift at the hospital, exhausted, still shaking off the tension of the day. The fluorescent lights, the steady beeping of machines, the endless chatter of nurses and patients. It all faded behind me as I turned onto the highway leading out of the city. The streets were slick and reflective, the neon signs smeared into watery streaks by the downpour, and the occasional headlights of passing cars cut through the darkness like knives. I always drove carefully in bad weather, but tonight the rain seemed alive. It pelted the windshield in uneven bursts, splashing over the wipers in a rhythm that almost felt purposeful. My car's tires hissed against the wet asphalt, and every mile I put between myself and the city brought a growing sense of isolation. I told myself it was just the storm, just fatigue, but the air felt heavier, colder, as if it carried something I couldn't see. Somewhere along the outskirts, near an abandoned stretch of highway lined with twisted trees and shuttered farmhouses, I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was a deer, darting between the shadows. But as I slowed to look, I realized it was a person standing at the side of the road. I squinted through the rain, trying to make out details. The figure was hunched, drenched, completely still. My first instinct was to keep driving. It wasn't uncommon to see stranded drivers or pedestrians this far from the city, but something about the way it stood, rigid and silent, made my chest tighten. I slowed the car, rolling down the window just enough to call out. "Hey, you need a ride?" My voice sounded small and distant over the roar of the rain. No answer. I tried again, louder this time, my knuckles tightening on the steering wheel. The figure didn't move. It didn't flinch. Even from the distance, I felt its gaze, or at least I thought it was a gaze, on me. Something deep inside me screamed to drive away, but another part of me, the one that never could ignore someone in trouble, held me there. Then it moved. Or maybe it didn't. It tilted its head slightly, the movement so slow and unnatural that it made my stomach twist. I floored the accelerator and passed it quickly. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, my headlights briefly illuminated its face. I wish I hadn't. Its eyes were black, solid and endless, like voids that consumed the light. Its skin was pallid, almost translucent in the storm, and its mouth hung slightly open, revealing teeth that weren't quite human. They were jagged, irregular, yellowed, and wet. I slammed my foot harder on the gas, my heart hammering so loudly it nearly drowned out the sound of the rain. When I looked back a second later, it was gone. I told myself it was fatigue, stress. Maybe the angle of the headlights had made a tree branch or a piece of debris look like a face, but my hands didn't relax, and my chest ached from the tension I couldn't shake. The highway began to twist and narrow as I drove farther into the countryside. Streetlights disappeared entirely, leaving only the harsh glare of my headlights slicing through the rain. Every curve in the road, every shadow between the trees seemed to move, to watch. I could feel it. Whatever I had glimpsed on the side of the road was still there, still following. Then, headlights appeared behind me, dim, steady, moving at the same speed. I swallowed hard, trying not to panic. It was late. There shouldn't be anyone else on this road. And yet, there it was, keeping pace. My instincts told me to pull over, to confront it, or maybe hide. But my gut screamed that any choice other than driving faster would be worse. I took the next turn onto a smaller road, hoping to lose whoever it was, but the car behind me followed, unwavering. Its lights flashed once, then twice, and I flinched, the brightness reflecting sharply in the rearview mirror. My hands shook on the wheel, my eyes darting to the trees lining the road, searching for a break, a place to escape. The rain intensified again, a torrential downpour that turned the road into a slick ribbon of black water. My wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Another figure, or maybe the same one, standing at the edge of the road. Its coat was soaked, clinging to its body, its head tilted in that same unnatural angle. Its face, pale and void-like, reflected the headlights in a way that made it appear almost carved from stone. I jerked the wheel hard, swerving around it, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. My heart felt like it had lodged in my throat. I caught a glimpse of it for a moment longer, and then it was gone. I drove without thinking, without direction, turning randomly onto side roads, hoping to put distance between myself and whatever this was. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed meaningless in the storm. I passed shuttered houses, empty fields, dense woods. Occasionally, a shadow flickered between the trees, always gone when I blinked, always just at the edge of vision. My radio had died hours ago, leaving only the rhythmic roar of rain and the hiss of tires against the road. Then I saw a light, a farmhouse, small and weathered, sitting at the end of a narrow lane. One upstairs window glowed faintly, yellow against the gray storm. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it, as if it offered some promise of safety. I turned down the lane, mud splashing under my tires, and parked haphazardly in front of the house. The door was ajar, swaying slightly in the wind. I hesitated, feeling a chill that wasn't just from the rain. My exhaustion battled with fear, curiosity clashing with instinct. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Mold, rot, wet wood. The floorboards creaked under my weight. The living room was empty, save for a tattered sofa and a small, flickering lamp. Shadows danced across peeling wallpaper, creating shapes that seemed alive. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step groaning ominously. Upstairs, the light came from a door at the end of the hall. I approached slowly, heart hammering, every nerve screaming. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to let a thin line of yellow spill into the dark hallway. Inside, it was empty, or so I thought. Then I saw it, perched on the edge of the bed, body hunched, head tilted. Its eyes caught mine instantly, black, endless, unfeeling. The mouth twisted into something between a sneer and a grimace. It didn't speak at first, just stared, and I felt the weight of its attention like a physical force pressing against my chest. And then it whispered, low and wet, barely audible over the rain, "You can't leave." I stumbled backward, heart racing, and fled down the stairs. The front door was inches from my hands, and I didn't stop running until I was back in my car. I slammed the door, locked it, and started the engine, rain smashing against the windshield, tires skimming puddles. I drove and drove. Every turn, every mile brought no relief. Occasionally, a shadow would flit across the road, always at the edge of vision, always gone when I tried to focus. Sometimes I thought I saw it in the rearview mirror, black eyes staring through the glass unblinking, unyielding. I never found the highway again. The road seemed endless, looping, twisting in ways that made no sense. The farmhouse, the figure, the flashing car, all of it repeated in my mind, as vivid as the night I had left the city. Sometimes in brief moments of rain, I think I can see the headlights again, following me, just far enough behind to be noticed but too distant to confront. I have no home now, no friends, no work. I drive through the storm, never stopping, never finding an escape. The rain never ceases, the storm never ends. And sometimes, in the reflection of the rearview mirror, I swear I can still see those black, empty eyes, waiting, patient, unyielding. No one believes me. Most would say I'm mad, that the stress, the fatigue, the rain, I just imagined it. But I know the truth. I've tried to stop. I've tried to hide, but it always finds me. And tonight, as I drive through yet another endless rain-drenched road, I see a shadow ahead, standing perfectly still, waiting for me to slow down. I keep driving. Story the end. It started on a Thursday evening, though it might as well have been any other night. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, drumming against the roof of my small apartment, like a warning I didn't understand until it was far too late. I had just finished my shift at the diner downtown, a place that smelled perpetually of fried onions and stale coffee, and was driving home on the wet, slick streets. The wipers struggled to keep up with the sheets of rain, leaving trails that made the city lights blur into long, smeared streaks. I remember thinking how lonely it all felt. The streets were nearly deserted, the neon signs from the 24-hour laundromats flickering weakly, their hum a subtle menace. My car tires hissed through the puddles, and every so often a flash of lightning illuminated the cracked pavement and abandoned shopping carts scattered across empty lots. That's when I first saw it. I didn't notice it at first. Not really. A figure, hunched and soaked, standing near the edge of the overpass, staring down at the cars as they passed. I slowed instinctively. At first, I thought it was a person in trouble, maybe someone thinking of jumping. But as I got closer, I realized the way it moved wasn't quite human. It tilted its head at an impossible angle and held something long and thin in its hand. I blinked, and the figure vanished as if it had been absorbed by the rain itself. I shook my head and muttered to myself, telling myself I'd been staring too long at the distorted reflections on the wet asphalt. I turned onto my street and parked under the dim yellow glow of the street lamp. My apartment wasn't far, just a short walk through the alley behind the corner store. As I stepped out, the rain soaked me instantly, plastering my hair to my forehead. I cursed, tugging at my jacket zipper, when I noticed footprints. They weren't mine. They started at the curb where I'd parked and continued straight down the alley. Fresh, deep impressions in the soft mud between the concrete slabs, as if someone or something had been pacing there for a while. I froze, staring at them. They were too irregular to belong to a normal person, too wide, the toes spread unnaturally apart. I glanced back toward the street. Nothing. The street was empty. No one was behind me. No one even close. I convinced myself it was some animal, maybe a raccoon, though the size was wrong. The rain kept pounding, and I hurried down the alley, footsteps echoing, my heart thumping. That's when I heard it, a soft, wet, dragging sound coming from the shadows at the far end. My breath hitched. I didn't want to look, but I did. A figure, tall, impossibly tall, hunched over in the way that makes you look twice, was emerging from the darkness. It had no discernible features, just a shadowy outline, but I could feel its gaze on me. I ran. My shoes slipped in the mud, and I nearly fell several times, but I made it to my apartment building and slammed the door behind me. The locks rattled as I double-checked them, breathing hard. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, cheap paint peeling off the walls, but it felt like the safest place on earth at that moment. I leaned against the door, listening. The rain pounded the windows, but there was something else, a scratching, faint, coming from the roof. Or maybe from above. My building was only 2 stories, but it sounded close, too deliberate to be random. I tried to call my friend, someone to laugh it off with, to tell me I was overreacting. The line was dead. All the lines were dead. Power flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The TV buzzed to life on its own, static filling the screen, and the scratching sound grew louder, now accompanied by soft, wet thumps. Not footsteps, but something heavier, dragging against the ceiling. I told myself it was just the rain, the old pipes, the wind, anything but what it really was. Around midnight, I finally convinced myself to sleep, curling under my thin blanket, listening to the storm. But the thumping didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. It moved. From the roof to the walls, from one side of the apartment to the other, like something alive was pacing just behind the drywall. And then I heard it. A whisper. Low, wet, barely audible over the storm. It said my name. I froze. The whisper repeated, clearer this time, dragging out each syllable. It was coming from inside the apartment now. I fumbled for my phone, flashlight app on, scanning the room. The beam landed on the hallway, and I swear I saw something step into it. Tall, thin, with arms that hung too long, fingers curling in the wrong direction. I couldn't see a face. I didn't want to. It was soaked, water dripping from some unseen source onto the carpet, forming small, black puddles that smelled like rust and rot. I ran to the door, keys in hand, planning to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. I pulled and yanked. The locks held firm, and the whispering grew louder, circling me, moving through the room as if it had no body, just sound. You can't leave. You can't leave. Then the lights went out. The flashlight flickered and died. The rain outside hit harder, turning the windows into blurred sheets of water. I could feel it moving closer. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The whisper became a wet, gurgling laughter that echoed through the walls. My heart slammed in my chest. I could hear something breathing. Heavy, wet, labored, but right behind me. I grabbed a kitchen knife, the only weapon I had. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold it. I took a step forward into the dark, and that's when it touched me. Cold, slimy fingers wrapped around my ankle, pulling me to the floor. I screamed, stabbing blindly, and the sound that came out wasn't human either. A wet, choking scream that made my ears ring. I blacked out. I woke up hours later, still in my apartment, knife in hand, sweat and rain soaking me. The whispering was gone. The storm outside had quieted. The apartment smelled of iron and wet dirt. I checked the locks. All were still secure. I called the police. They came, took a report, checked the building. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of entry, no evidence at all. I tried to sleep that night. Couldn't. Every sound, every drip of water, every gust of wind felt like it was right behind me, waiting. And then the power went out again. I could hear the whispering from the corner of the room. You can't leave. I moved out the next day, took the first available apartment I could find across town. I thought maybe distance would help, maybe time would make it less real. But it followed me. Not physically. At least, not in a way I could see, but in the rain. Every time it rained, I saw it. Standing in the distance, hunched, watching, waiting. Some nights, I swear it's in my apartment, pacing, dragging itself behind the walls, whispering my name. I've told people, friends, family, the police. No one believes me. They say stress, imagination, overwork. But I know what I felt. I know what touched me. And I know the rain carries it, the way it falls in sheets, soaking the world and leaving traces of something that should not exist. Last week, I was driving home in the rain, lights reflecting on the asphalt, wipers squealing, and I saw a figure at the edge of an overpass. I froze. Same posture, same impossible angle. It didn't move when I blinked. It just watched. I knew then I wasn't going to get away. The rain, the darkness, the city itself, somewhere in it, it waits. And when it rains, it comes for you. I can hear it now, outside my window. The rain hitting the roof, soft at first, then heavier. I hear the dragging faint moving closer. I tried to ignore it, but I know better. The whispering will start soon, and when it does, I won't be able to leave. It has always been waiting in the rain. And now, it's here. Story the end. The rain had been coming down since the afternoon, thick sheets that blurred everything outside and soaked the streets until they looked like shallow rivers. By evening, most people had retreated indoors, the town seeming quieter than usual, muffled by the storm. I was driving back from work, wipers struggling to keep the windshield clear, headlights cutting through the curtain of water. The storm made everything feel strange, like the world was smaller, boxed in by darkness and the sound of rain hammering the car roof. I took the back roads like I always did, thinking less traffic would make for an easier drive. It was a mistake. Those roads were narrow, lined with thick woods, and prone to flooding. About 10 minutes in, I slowed down to a crawl, the water rising over the edges of the asphalt. Every bend made me nervous, the forest pressing close, the beams of my headlights catching only the slick shine of rain. I could barely hear the engine over the rain's constant roar. It was at one of those sharp bends that I saw him, a man standing by the side of the road, rain pouring down on him, soaked through. He wasn't waving, wasn't even moving, just standing there. I hit the brakes, heart jolting, the tires slipping slightly before gripping again. The man didn't flinch at the sound. He wore jeans and a dark jacket that clung to his body, his hair plastered against his head. He had no umbrella, no hood, nothing. I rolled down the window a crack, the smell of wet leaves rushing in. "Hey, you all right?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud, wrong against the noise of the rain. The man turned his head slowly toward me. His face was pale, and though the water streaked down, I could see his eyes, dark, fixed, unblinking. He didn't answer. I felt a twist of unease. Something in me screamed to drive on, but I couldn't just leave him there. "You need a ride?" I asked. He walked toward the car without saying a word. My stomach knotted. He opened the passenger door and slid inside. The smell of wet earth filled the car, heavy and damp. He didn't look at me, just faced forward, his hands resting on his knees. I hesitated before pulling back onto the road. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused. "Into town," he said finally, voice low, almost drowned out by the rain. The ride stretched long and tense. He didn't ask why I was out, didn't make small talk. He just sat there, water dripping onto the floor mat. Every now and then I glanced at him. He never took his eyes off the road ahead, but there was something off about the way he sat, rigid, almost too still, like he was bracing for something. After a few minutes, I noticed something else. His clothes weren't just wet. They were stained. Dark patches spread across the fabric, not the even soaking of rain, but something thicker, something that clung. At first, I told myself it was mud, but the longer I looked, the less certain I was. "Did you get caught out in the storm?" I asked, my throat dry. He turned his head slowly to me, and this time he smiled. It wasn't wide or friendly, just a slight curl of his lips that never reached his eyes. "Something like that," he said. I forced a laugh, brittle and thin, and focused on the road. The rain was coming down harder now, making it almost impossible to see. My headlights reflected against the floodwater, casting strange shifting shapes across the trees. Every mile felt like 10. We passed a stretch where the trees opened up to a field. That's when I noticed something in the beam of the lights. A shape lying at the edge of the field, near the ditch. I slowed instinctively. It looked like a body, sprawled out, unmoving. My chest tightened. I glanced at the man beside me. He was already watching me, that thin smile still on his face. "Don't stop," he said softly. My grip on the wheel tightened. The words weren't loud, but they cut through everything. The rain, the hum of the engine, my own racing thoughts. He said it like a command. I swallowed hard and pressed the gas again, the car pushing past the figure in the ditch. I didn't look back. My hands were slick with sweat despite the chill creeping through the car. "You shouldn't be out tonight," the man said after a while, his tone casual, almost conversational. "Neither should you," I muttered before I could stop myself. He chuckled, a sound that didn't match his face. "You're right," he said, "but I had no choice." The rest of the ride blurred. My thoughts spun in circles, torn between wanting to throw him out of the car and being too afraid of what he might do if I tried. The rain was relentless, a wall of sound that made me feel trapped, sealed off from the rest of the world. Finally, the outskirts of town appeared through the downpour. I exhaled in relief. "Where should I drop you?" I asked. He leaned forward, pointing down a side street. "There." I turned onto the street, lined with dark houses. No lights, no movement, just the rain pouring over everything. He told me to stop in front of a small, rundown house. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. "Thanks for the ride," he said, opening the door. I watched as he stepped out, his figure swallowed quickly by the rain. He didn't go toward the house, though. He just stood there on the sidewalk, watching as I pulled away. Even when I turned the corner, I could still feel his eyes on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, those dark stains on his clothes. I kept hearing his voice telling me not to stop, and I kept thinking about the body I'd seen lying by the ditch. The next morning, the rain had finally stopped, though the sky was still gray. The town felt uneasy, as if everyone was moving slower, speaking softer. I stopped at the diner for coffee, needing the comfort of routine. The waitress, someone I'd known since high school, leaned close as she set down my cup. "Did you hear?" she asked. "They found a body out by the fields." My stomach dropped. "What?" She nodded grimly. "Sheriff says it must have happened during the storm. Some poor guy, beaten bad. They think he was dumped there." I tried to keep my face neutral, but my mind was racing. The body, the man in my car, the stains on his clothes. I left the diner without finishing my coffee. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange pull to drive back out there, to see for myself. Against my better judgment, I did. The police had already taped off the area. I parked a little down the road, far enough not to draw attention, and sat there watching. The ditch was visible from where I sat, though the body was gone. What struck me wasn't the scene itself, but the sight of a dark figure standing beyond the tape, half hidden by the trees. Even from a distance, I knew it was him. The soaked clothes were gone, but the way he stood, the tilt of his head, it was the same. He was watching, just like he had watched me when he stepped out of my car. And then, as if he knew I was there, he turned his head toward me. That same thin smile spread across his face. I drove off, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. That night, the rain started again. I sat in my living room, every shadow stretched too long, every creak of the house too loud. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see him standing outside. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with the sound of rain and that voice whispering not to stop. Days turned into weeks, but I never really shook it. They never caught anyone for the killing. No suspects, no leads, just a body found on a stormy night. I never told anyone about picking him up. I couldn't. Who would believe me? And if he found out I'd spoken, I had no doubt he'd come back for me. Sometimes when the rain comes down heavy, I swear I see him again, standing at the edge of the road, soaked, waiting. And I know that if I ever stop again, I won't be driving away. Story the end. The rain had been falling steadily since late afternoon, a relentless gray curtain that blurred the outlines of everything and made the world feel smaller, closed in. The kind of rain that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you wore, the kind that drummed endlessly against windows and rooftops, beating like a slow, steady pulse. By the time night settled in, the streets of the small Ohio town were nearly empty. Puddles swallowing sidewalks, gutters overflowing, and the sound of rushing water drowning out even the occasional car that splashed by. For Evan, it was supposed to be just another night. He worked evenings at a gas station that sat on the outskirts of town, just off the state highway. The place was quiet most nights, especially when it rained like this, and he usually killed time wiping down counters, restocking snacks, and watching the security monitors mounted behind the counter. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, flickering every so often, casting everything in a washed-out glow that made the hours drag slower. He didn't like storms, not because he was afraid of them, but because of what they did to the atmosphere inside that station. The glass windows turned black, reflecting the aisles back at him, and the rain covered up outside noises so completely that he felt cut off. Cars pulled in silently until their headlights flared, and people slipped in dripping wet, shuffling around with that restless edge the weather seemed to give everyone. But tonight, even fewer people had come through. By 9, there had been only 3 customers, 2 of them truckers grabbing coffee, and 1 older woman who complained about how slick the roads had gotten. Evan leaned against the counter, staring at the monitors again, the rain hammering louder on the roof as if it were pressing closer and closing the place entirely. Around 9:30, the door chime sounded. Evan straightened, expecting another weary driver, but for a few seconds no one appeared. The door had definitely opened, but the glass only reflected rain-blurred neon from the signs outside. Then, slowly, a figure stepped inside. The man was tall, his hood pulled low over his head, water dripping from the hem of his jacket. He moved strangely, pausing just inside the door as though adjusting to the light, or maybe listening. His boots squeaked faintly on the tiles as he started down the nearest aisle. Evan greeted him with a half-hearted, "Hey there!" But the man didn't answer. That wasn't unusual, though. It was late. People were tired. Still, there was something about the way the guy moved that made Evan uneasy. The man didn't browse, didn't even seem to look at anything on the shelves. He just walked slowly up one aisle, down another, head angled slightly down, hands hidden in his pockets. Evan tried to keep an eye on him through the monitor, but the cameras were grainy, the rain outside causing occasional static ripples across the screen. When the man passed under the one by the back of the store, for a split second, Evan thought his face looked wrong. Pale, almost blurred, like the camera had caught motion where there wasn't any. He shook it off. Cheap system, bad angle, water interfering. There was always some explanation. Still, when the man finally came up to the counter, empty-handed, Evan's nerves tightened. The guy just stood there, dripping water onto the floor, staring. His hood shadowed his face so much Evan could only make out his mouth, and even that was strange. Thin, colorless lips pressed tightly together. "Need something?" Evan asked, trying to sound casual. The man didn't answer. He just breathed, slow and deep, fogging the glass of the counter with each exhale. Evan's hand twitched toward the register, then the silent alarm under the counter, but he hesitated. Maybe the guy was drunk or high or just off. Finally, after what felt like a long minute, the man turned and walked back out into the rain without a word. The chime sounded again, the door closed, and he was gone. Evan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He checked the monitors, watching for where the guy had gone, but the cameras outside were nearly useless in the downpour, just shifting shadows and the shimmer of headlights passing. He didn't see him again. An hour passed. No more customers came. The rain got heavier, if that was even possible, thrumming so hard on the roof that Evan sometimes couldn't hear the faint hum of the cooler in the back. He busied himself restocking shelves, sweeping the floor, anything to keep from staring at those black windows. Every so often he thought he saw movement outside, just beyond the glass, but it always turned out to be branches shifting under the weight of water, or the reflection of headlights smearing across the wet parking lot. But at 11:15, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, buzzed, and then cut out completely for 2 long seconds before the emergency generator kicked in. A few lights sputtered back to life, weaker, casting the store in uneven shadows. The security monitors went black and stayed that way. Evan swore under his breath. He hated when the cameras went down. Now all he had was his view through the windows, and those only reflected back at him, a mirror of himself moving between aisles, distorted by the rain outside. He tried not to think about the man from earlier, but he couldn't shake the way he'd stood there, silent, dripping, as if waiting for something. At 11:40, he heard the door chime again. Evan looked up quickly, heart thumping, but no one came in. The door had opened. He was sure of it. The chime wasn't subtle, and it only went off if the door actually moved. But the glass showed nothing. The parking lot outside looked empty, just sheets of rain sliding under the glow of the floodlights. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding too loud in the half-lit store. No answer. He circled the aisles, peering down each one. But they were empty. Just the hum of the coolers, the tap of water dripping from someone's umbrella stand near the door. When he got back to the counter, the door was closed tight, the chime silent. Unease crawled down his spine. He told himself the wind had blown it open, maybe. Sometimes that happened, though usually not with the latch in place. Still, it was easier to believe than the alternative. Around midnight, another trucker came in. The man was cheerful enough, chatting about the miserable weather, filling a thermos with coffee. Evan tried to act normal, though his eyes kept darting to the windows. When the trucker left, the store felt emptier than before, the silence pressing down harder. And then Evan noticed the footprints. They were faint, but unmistakable. Wet boot prints leading away from the front door, across the tile, vanishing halfway down an aisle. He hadn't seen them before, not when he'd walked through earlier, and they hadn't been made by the trucker. The size was wrong, larger, and the path didn't match where the man had gone. Evan's stomach dropped. He followed them slowly, each step sounding too loud on the wet floor, but the prints just stopped. No smudge, no dry marks, nothing. As if whoever made them had vanished. He backed away, pulse hammering. That was when he heard it. A faint sound, almost covered by the rain. Breathing, slow, steady, coming from somewhere in the aisles. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice shaking. The breathing stopped. He grabbed the phone and dialed the police, but the line was dead. Not even static, just silence. The storm must have knocked it out. His cell phone showed no signal either. For the first time all night, Evan felt real fear clawing at him. He wasn't imagining this. Someone was in the store with him. He went behind the counter, hands shaking, and reached under it for the baseball bat the manager kept there. He held it tight, staring at the aisles, waiting for movement. Minutes crawled by, the rain pounding harder and harder, as though the world outside was trying to smother the building completely. And then, slowly, a figure appeared at the far end of the aisle. It was the same man. The hood still up, jacket dripping though he hadn't seen the door open again. He just stood there, unmoving, as if the rain had followed him inside. Evan's throat went dry. "You need to leave," he managed to say, voice trembling. The man didn't move. Evan gripped the bat tighter, but when he blinked, the man was gone. The aisle was empty. He stumbled out from behind the counter, heart racing, scanning every row. Nothing. No footprints this time, no sign anyone had been there at all. But the air felt colder, damp like the storm itself was leaking through the walls. The hours dragged on. Evan didn't remember sitting down, but he found himself hunched behind the counter, staring at the dark monitors, listening. Every so often he thought he heard footsteps on the tile or a faint knock against the glass, but whenever he looked, the store was empty. He lost track of time, the storm outside swallowing everything. Sometime past 2, he heard the door chime again. This time he didn't move. He just listened, breath held as slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the floor. They stopped just on the other side of the counter. Evan looked up and for the first time saw the man's face clearly. Pale skin stretched too tight, eyes too dark, mouth too wide and too still. Water streamed down his cheeks, though his hood was dry, his lips parting just enough to reveal teeth that didn't look quite right. Too sharp, too many. And then the lights went out completely. The storm roared louder than ever, but inside the store there was only silence, broken by the sound of breathing, so close it brushed against Evan's ear. No one found him the next morning when the manager arrived. The store was empty, the lights back on, everything in order except for the counter. The chair behind it was pushed back, and the floor there was soaked, as if someone had stood dripping for hours. The security cameras had come back online at dawn, but the footage from the night before was nothing but static. And out in the parking lot, in the fresh puddles left by the receding storm, there were footprints. Large, waterlogged prints that led from the front door out toward the road. But they didn't fade with distance. They just stopped, as if whoever had made them had stepped off the earth entirely. Story the end.